It being 6 o'clock on December the 8th, I call the Finance Committee meeting to order. The first item on our agenda is to approve the November 17th meeting minutes. Give everybody a minute to peruse them, and then I'll entertain a motion. If there's nothing that somebody might see different that needs to be changed. Oops. Just take one, I guess. Do that. How much?
Well, no, I'll go really quickly. Oh, geez, this is very good. Oh, different.
Is this a note? Or is this one page, right?
One page, yes.
All right. Everybody had an opportunity to look at the minutes, and if so,
I'll make a motion to accept.
all right, do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous. We approve the minutes, and I better sign it before I forget, because I will forget. Hand them off to you so I don't lose them. All right. Town manager is up on capital improvements.
I am, thank you very much. Do you want me to go over there? Hi, Jan. I want to say thank you to everybody, some new faces here, and I appreciate that. Obviously, my focus tonight is on those items that I have submitted previously that we might not have funded yet, but were slated to be discussed for this year. So I'm prepared to talk to at least two of those. And then I have a new one that has arisen out of wonderful grant opportunities, and sometimes our priorities change depending on that. So if you have a moment, why don't we start first with one of the handouts that is called the ADA compliant bandstand ramp, walkway, and handicap parking area, and also / garage. So let me give you a little background on this. I think if you go by our bandstand, you'll see a rather large ADA and architectural access board ramp that is being built. It's a priority of the Disability Commission, in particular one member who had a very difficult time at one point in time, and could have resulted in some severe injury in getting up on that bandstand. Having said that, what we did do, even though it wasn't funded in that given year, I have now applied twice for the Mass Office of Disability Project Improvement Grant funding for about $250,000, hoping we could get this project funded. There's a lot of towns that apply. On the two occasions that we applied, we did not get the funding. However, this year, once again, I have Director of Planning and Economic Development, Tony Sousa. I said, why don't you take a stab at it? You've been successful on at least 3 grants where I was not successful, and sometimes it's just a matter of getting it in front of them year after year, but it still takes effort to put the package together. So with regards to that project, it was sort of put on a back burner. We didn't have the funding through grants, and it wasn't yet for this capital planning year. Now we're in this capital planning year. But before we did that, this past year, we had a higher amount than usual for our Smolensky-Millette Trust. And this actual ramp that the Oxford Business Association had also been working with my office about and had been speaking to me, and that's one of the impetuses of my, putting it forward to this Finance Committee in the past. They actually submitted to the Smolensky-Millette Fund because a lot of events on the bandstand also affect children and youth, and that's the main aspect or criteria for funding. So it was actually funded, and that's why you see our director for our DPW has embarked on replacing that ramp. It was funded in the amount of $50,541. It's still under construction. And one of the things that you're not going to see here until I talk about it at the end, because we have looked at, okay, what in my original proposal is being completed and what isn't. So the ramp was a major piece of it, and now we have grant funding, so we're moving forward with that. But the other pieces relate to how do you get to the ramp. Right now, it's all grass, and that's not conducive to anybody who has physical challenges. So, the other piece, if you look in your packet here, you'll see the original design just had a straight shot out of the, I want to say this one, it had a straight shot out of the design of the bandstand. We didn't like that design. It wasn't necessarily not just liking it, it was also about architectural access board and ADA compliant. So you'll see that it actually starts on the other side of the bandstand and snakes around the back. Having said that, just putting in a straight walkway is only going to help somebody who's trying to come from the street to the bandstand. It does nothing to provide handicap parking. It does nothing to provide access to the beautiful benches and the pots that we have on the common in octagonal fashion around the bandstand. So the original amount that I had put in for the totality of this project, which included the replacement of the ramps, it included the paving of new not sidewalks, but pathways around the actual bandstand that goes directly in a circular fashion to the existing benches and also directly to either side of the bandstand. It also included handicap parking on the back side. We have a lot of room on one side, but then we have this old garage that's really not in keeping.
No.
Yeah, now you can, yeah.
I couldn't place it.
Well, yeah, so now you know
Now
where
I
I'm
know where it
talking.
is.
So those were the components that I had in the original grant, not grant, but original capital planning project proposal, with the exception of the garage. That has come up now because we have issues with trying to move this other project forward. So if we took the 50,000 off of the ramp portion, that still means we have 146,802 in our proposal. What you see before you in this packet is looking at actually being able to do the sidewalk slash pathway and the construction of handicap parking on the back. Jared and I have talked about it making also some other parking in the back, because those people who are doing events on the common oftentimes are parking right up on the lawn, and it ruins all the hard work DPW does. That's, you know, why in a lot of ways we've changed up the types of events we do on the common, because it is historic. We do have very large specimen trees, and what we need to do is actually create the designated safe areas for not just handicap patrons, but also people who are hosting events. So our plan is to put a number of parking on the back, and
The whole stretch of the back?
not the whole stretch, because there are some trees that kind of wander closer to the street. We just repaved the back street there. So I think, you know, we were talking about trying to do maybe 5, 6, maybe maximum 7, I don't even know. But if we were to remove or move the current garage, because that's what it is, I put together some quotes that even if we did a as-built 24 by 24 garage, you can see in here, I gave you some ideas of that being anywhere between a build price of $62,000 for a 24 by 24 and a 24 by 28, $68,000. I gave another quote for something that is quite picturesque, more Victorian cottage. It could be any color. When it says cottage, they come in all sizes. They can be 18 by 20, they can be other sizes. Obviously, this is to give you some ideas. That price for that particular building that's an 18 by 20 would be $69,000 plus the foundation work that we would do. So what I did is I looked at what's the overall cost for that kind of replacement of the garage to move it off to the side, so that maybe we're not staring at this, you know, cinder block building that is, if you looked at the pictures, it's very
It's there.
non-beautifying of the
Yeah.
common. And it's also, it's run its course. I mean, it's got, you know, it's got wire up against the windows. It's served its purpose for just sort of being a catch-all, which isn't very helpful. I envision that the more events we have on the common, we may need people to have space to prepare for that and to prepare for it someplace out of the elements. We need some storage. We could incorporate storage upstairs for all of the necessary equipment that we would use for a number of events. So if we were to put that building plus the sidewalks / pathways in the parking, we think that the parking and the pathways could be done for about $35,000. The building could be done for, let's just say, $69,000 plus some foundation work. So we think that that total that I put there is about $111,802 for estimates. That would take care of the ramp portion. It takes care, which is being constructed, takes care of all the pathways around it. It takes care of the parking, and it would take care of moving that, it would take care of moving that building. And maybe moving it, kitty corner so that it's not the main thing you see. We got this beautiful historic little building for our schoolhouse, and then we have that thing next to it. So I recognize we tried beautifying it years ago before I got here and painting it, and but it's like putting lipstick on a pig. It's still a little pig, right? So anyway, so I would maintain that we could, with that kind of money, still be able to do the majority of this project, of the $146,802. I have one caveat though, and Jared, like I said, once you start a project, you might get grant funding, and then you realize, okay, am I going to keep something the same, or am I going to upgrade it while we're doing the project? So we have a problem with the new ramp going in. The ADA typical compliant railings are usually those pipe railings. You see, we have them at Carbuncle and the like, but there are ornamental railings that would still also comply. But right now, what we have on the bandstand is, they're not historic. They're almost old railings that you would see on people's steps going down their houses, probably from the, 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s.
Typical wrought iron.
Yeah.
So, they're trying to match the brick and all of that with the mason work, but now we have to make a decision. So I didn't put it in the $146,802 ask, but I would suggest that if we are going to do it, because most of this work for the ramp is going to be completed in the spring, we might want to consider that. And I will pursue grant opportunities to try to offset that as well. As you might imagine, there are a lot of things that have been on my to-do list that we will always try to pursue, some kind of offset with grant funding. So, if you have any questions about that, you can ask me, but obviously this has to do with the beautification and enhancement portion of our master plan. It's about improving our downtown. And by the way, we have another grant of $24,000 through the Malzer Foundation. We had gotten one for about 30 some odd thousand that got us our pots and that you see across the town, and got us some of the benches. And now we put in, with Tony Sousa, we got another one this year, and that is to actually put some of the same kind of style benches on the common, more like a picnic area. So the tables have that wide slat that's powder coated. There would be an opportunity for somebody who is physically challenged to come up to a table. So there will be a couple tables. It's not a lot, but if there's 4 tables, one of them would be designated as handicap accessible on one side. And so we wanted some that looked like a little cafe table, where we might put out some umbrellas in the summer, because people have been sitting on the benches trying to eat, and it's not the same as if you go in there with your kids and you want to sit at a table. And during COVID, we had a lot of people doing that.
Yeah, sure,
and they kept
that's
saying, if we only had picnic tables, not the big bright orange ones that we used to have at Carbuncle, because that's all that we had on that common. We had no benches. So now we have the opportunity to put 3 and 4 little cafe tables that are being funded by a grant, and I think it's 3 longer, beautiful wrought iron picnic tables. They'd be on just the complete opposite ends, away from where a lot of activity takes place, and someplace where families can go. And then that grant is also going to provide new benches down Main Street heading towards Webster, with pots on either side, to make a destination for people coming from the senior housing and people walking south along Main Street. We've been doing a lot of work up this way and all the way up to Carbuncle. Now we need to focus and shift our Main Street that way. So I just tell you that because anytime, we get grant money, sometimes it's important to do these things sequentially. And I would say that for me, this is an important piece to get this right on the common and to be able to do, some things that I think are gonna be very helpful in continuing to attract. Did anybody get a chance to come to the parade of lights and the tree lighting?
No.
Wasn't it
It
unbelievable?
was great.
Yep. Chief Sad had said to me he hadn't seen that number of people, and they were all along Main Street, all the way down into
Well,
North
they pulled
Oxford.
that together in
Yes.
5 days, I think. They
Right.
announced it on Facebook or wherever.
And we had like
then-
26 vehicles, and
Now, the night before, I went to Spencer.
and I bet that was
Well,
phenomenal
it's
because they've been doing it
an
for a
hour
while.
and 15 minutes.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, and so my daughter and I are making a challenge, we're gonna
Trying to do something.
Yeah,
Well, the
it
DPW's
was great.
Grinchmobile was unbelievable,
Oh, great.
and it was. If you hadn't seen it, we're going to put some photographs. I had them last night, but our television over there wasn't working. Where the DPW crew was really very spirited, from the Grinch to Cindy Lou Who to the little Whoville children to Buddy the Elf. I mean, it was, and they had the truck with the Christmas tree jammed into the shredder. The tree chipper
Yeah.
with lights on it. It was phenomenal. It was really good. So the reason why I bring those kinds of things up, we're going to continue to draw. We had the Scarecrow Festival. We have movies on Main Street, more and more. One of the things with the ask for the building, we may look at incorporating, an inside bathroom facility. Of course, that means more. Upkeep for us, but right now we only have the porta potties, which are also not very good looking. Yes.
Oh, they're rustic.
Yeah.
They are
They're
rustic.
rustic, not really beautiful, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Funny you say that, because the high school wanted to do something for storage, a facility for their football field and stuff, and have an outdoor bathroom facility there. When I was touring the schools in August, they said that would be a good future project for them, so that people don't have to come into the school to use the facilities when they're selling
Yeah.
popcorn and stuff. They had and then they had some storage there as well, so it'd be a quasi bathroom and a storage facility, and concession stand, if you will, whatever. That would be something that, I know they have future talk
Yeah,
about that.
it's interesting because things like this building, the roof is not very good, and I don't know. Somebody did put curtains in the window years ago.
Yep,
I remember
yep,
that.
I remember
Yeah,
that.
and I can see that, but it's like now we have to figure out what do we do next. So anyway, so that 146,802, along with some kind of railing, to be sure that you understand, we have been soliciting a lot of requests and bids for things, and we are finding ourselves behind the 8 ball with being able to come up with information, because a lot of companies have so much work, they're just not responding. They're not responding, and or because they can't get the actual equipment, right? So a classic example of that will be the next thing I'll kind of discuss, and that's the Main Street improvements. But before I move on, are we all set with any questions?
If we're successful in getting part or all of this from a grant standpoint, and we fund it, where does that unspent money come back? How does it, explain that, how does that come back?
Well, it's one of two ways. We can I can roll it at the end of the year knowing it's not going to be spent, or we can reappropriate it at a subsequent time.
So it would come back as free cash following year,
If I close it.
if you close it.
Right,
I'm just,
right.
I kind of knew the answer, but I wanted, because people keep asking, where's this free cash come from? Where's this free cash come from?
Yeah.
These are the types of things where free cash comes from. If
Right.
you
It's-
anticipate something and then somebody steps up to the plate and funds it for you, and you've already budgeted it, then that money goes back to Katie to decide whether it's free cash or reappropriated into something else, which would then come back to us to
Like,
approve.
for example, I think with this next capital plan, Jared has received a grant for, well, I should say Oxford has received, but I'm
Yeah.
sure Jared was a big part of it for the Leicester Street Bridge. The state's going to come through and do that. So we have appropriation of 500 and something.
65,000.
565,000 on the books, but we're not going to use. So my plan is to reappropriate it for our capital program this coming year.
So, it is really remarkable in the 4 years that I've been here. We're talking well in excess of 14 million in grant funding. It's such a success that it actually puts us in an awkward position because we're trying to get through. I have one engineer over here, and he's also in charge of all the departments very capably under DPW. And the thing here is that, there's only so fast that you can go because there are things that you want your engineer to actually look at and scrutinize and approve. So, as we go forward in the regular operational budget, you may hear me start to talk about things in the similar way that I've looked at other departments, and that is bring in professional people to be able to move things along in departments. And sometimes that means project managers, sometimes it means engineers, sometimes it means business operations people, whatever it is, so that we can keep moving things along. Because if we're successful in moving the projects forward more quickly, with inflation or quick changes to the market in cost, it's very helpful because we'll save money in the long run. And it's exciting. It's exciting to have $8+ million on the books to be done. But it's also exciting to get them done. And a classic example is the methodical way I put together capital plans and items. On a previous capital plan, before some of the members here who are on the committee were sitting here, the initiative about doing strategic communications took from the manager's office a variety of different goals. And one of the things I set long in advance was the communication board. And eventually we funded it this past year, and we were able to get the inside portions of it done, starting out before July. And I wound up actually looking into federal grant money to look at how we could perhaps get grant funding for the electronic components, which are expensive. It's $30,000+.
Yeah.
And then the design and everything took place after the fact. So, we appropriated money for that project, about $45,000, right?
Yeah.
And so what it allowed me to do is buy a higher resolution, better sign for the electronic components, because that was being taken care of once we got
What was it,
our
25
reimbursement.
more? We got some kind of, with the 45, was it?
No, the 45 was actual part of the
Appropriated.
grant, part of the building improvement
And
fund.
then we got,
Right.
we got some other monies.
And then we got money from the federal government and state government with regards to COVID and using electronic messaging, because we
Yeah,
didn't
yeah.
have that, right?
Right,
So,
right.
thinking out of the box, I said, this would be invaluable. Our
People know
our
where we
EMS
are.
director could, we could have sent messages out constantly instead of having our custodian go out and put little hand messages and one message at a time. It was, something from the 1940s, but even the 1940s monument sign wasn't going to work. Huh? It wasn't there? Okay. Well, they did say...
Wasn't there in 1971. I'll
Okay,
tell you that.
so they did say when they were dismantling it that the brick was different, and they said that they were trying to make it look old, but it wasn't as old. So,
Right.
so I'm glad you told me that. But,
Yeah,
but anyway,
sometime
that's
after 1971.
that's just a classic example of leveraging. And so yes, we're still spending money on the the nice design and the aesthetics of what it should look like in proximity to this beautiful 1800s building. But it takes time. You go through and get approval through the Historic Commission chair for the design, and you try to incorporate those elements, and then the whole thing comes together. So 7 months later, as of yesterday, it's really exciting to see
Yeah,
it
we
there.
finally see it.
Yeah.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you. Yes, yes. We figured, everyone always asks us, when are you going to put that up on the sign? So
Yeah.
we figured we'd preempt that from everybody.
Now, the library is doing one too.
Right. So we've talked about that, about trying not to become a lighted corridor, and the director and I were talking about placement that might be more closer to the building, so that when someone is coming down Sigourney or going by, that it's not as close to the street. And so this is that whole notion of communication, and people get excited, and then we realize that we want to make sure we're not necessarily duplicating, triplicating our efforts. But we're working on that piece of it. But thank you for informing me, because if I didn't know that, you'd be telling me that right now. So.
I have a couple questions. When you have to decide how many handicapped parking places, are there parameters that you have to follow that are set up by ADA? I mean, you can't just pick something out of the air.
No.
So what would be the minimum number of Or do you know what the minimum number of parking spaces would be that we'd have to have?
There's a breakdown in the AUB, the Massachusetts Architectural Access Board regulations. I don't know offhand, but for that, it's usually a range, right?
Right.
It's based on occupancy or usage or total parking for a facility, right? So for that size facility, it's probably one spot minimum, quite
Oh.
frankly. And it's usually one van accessible spot, so you need an 8-foot aisle.
Oh, so we would have-
So you can have someone offloaded there with an appropriate buffer, right? Those buffered
Yeah.
gored markings that you see adjacent to a handicap spot. So, I mean, if we did 2 spots there, and this is something we consult certainly with the building commissioner on too, because this is really something that's in his lane, but 1 to 2 spots out of, it's 5, 6, 7 spots total is probably all we would need from a regulatory standpoint. You can
Okay,
always
so
do
you're
more,
not
you can
looking
always
at-
do more.
Okay, because I might have misunderstood. You're not looking at putting in 6 or 7 spots, you're looking at putting in a smaller number of handicap compliant
It'd probably be 6 or 7 spots total.
total,
And
but,
you're looking at 1 or
and
2
maybe-
of those potentially would be, at least one
yeah.
would be handicap compliant.
And
Okay.
people who
And-
may
yeah, that's
need
right.
that,
Yeah.
because of their actual physical limitation, at least it's closer,
Mhm.
even with all of those actual, spots that we have,
When the
because
van-
right now
When the
there's.
vans are unloading and things like that, like you said, they're driving on the lawn, so
Yes,
it's-
yes, so that's
Yeah.
another piece of it.
I want to say it's upwards of almost 20 spots even,
Yeah.
and I don't want to, I can
I know,
dig into
promise
that,
people,
yeah.
Okay.
because people get excited about,
Exactly,
oh,
then it
we're
could be
gonna
one-
ruin something and we don't wanna.
So there's a
talk about it.
minimum, and you can always do more than the minimum, and you
Right.
can always base it on, as long as you're in exceedance of the minimum, it can be based on actual need too.
Right.
So if we think it's more, but.
Right, because even accessing the park from the front closest to Main Street, it is not handicap accessible.
Right.
You actually have to,
Go up.
step up.
Yeah.
And that is something that's been on the radar from the previous DPW director, that, in the future redesign of Main Street, those kind of improvements, we would want to make at that time and create, the designated areas for
A
parking
bump
along
out
the.
where you could,
Right, so you can be
Offload.
safe as well,
Yeah, have a
It was
bump out.
interesting because our police chief had mentioned that he said, boy, am I happy that those pedestrian islands are there, because it slowed everybody down with the crowds that we had downtown. We
Oh,
haven't
that's
had
scary.
those crowds, and it was nighttime, and people already were slowing down. So I think this will be a nice segue to my next, if it's okay with you, Mr. Chairman.
sure.
Okay, I have another question.
Sure, go ahead.
And I just
Um,
confirmed,
yeah.
sorry, it's up to 25 spots total, it's 1, so just so you know, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Is the minimum.
Now, what are we using that garage for now? Is there anything in there?
It's kind of
Yeah.
catch-all.
Yeah, there's
So it's
things,
gonna get cleaned out. I'm
Um,
big into cleaning
I would
and
say it would get
downsizing.
cleaned out and it probably would get demolished and we would rebuild, perhaps not facing this way. I mean, it's just an idea at this concept, I don't know if we can do it, but more shift the direction of it so that, the lengthwise that would look nice facing the street and not look like a garage or something like that, would still be facing, and try to get it with the aesthetics that we have, with the schoolhouse building there. That would be the best thing to try to do. If we couldn't do it, then, we place, I would say, a disadvantage to our DPW and many other people who have used that building for things. We now do a lot of beautification of buckets all around. It's a place where we can, set up with plants. When you're talking about hundreds of plants coming in, we don't just leave them out so that someone can take them, right? So, it's been there, it's been places, it's housed in the past, historic dress and things like that. Those things I think will not,
There's a picture here, isn't it? Yeah, there's
Yeah,
some scarecrows in there.
yeah, the scarecrows are
Yeah,
actually
and
were
these
put in.
are some
So
signs,
it's a little scary in there.
scarecrows,
And
folding
Some
chairs.
expired
So,
traffic tape
right,
in there, I know.
so, yeah, it was, this is actually a huge improvement, because both Shelley, our OCC director, went in there, and so did Lori Masoni,
Clean
and I
house.
said, okay, I can't stand this anymore, we have to do something, there were just tons of old
Stuff.
Christmas, Christmas
Stuff.
decoration, boxes,
Right, for the-
and
for
people
the-
would get done with their event and they would just throw it in there,
Yeah.
and, I don't know why, but that's the way it was. So we want to, be much more orderly. So that, as we, continue to expand, that we have designated areas for specific functions for our DPW and our OCC, because those are gonna be the, the main, committees along with the cultural council.
Well, if you got a grant, I'd love to see bathrooms there.
I know.
Bathrooms would be nice.
So,
That-
so
with the grant
with
money, that'd
regards
be
to
great.
this, one of the grants that I would like to apply to, and I have to look at the timeline, that we've never done, and I know other communities have, communities that really emphasize the arts and culture, would be a Mass Cultural Facilities grant. And I think we could make the case for it, being the hub of cultural events. And so that would be one of the things I'd like to try to do as we go forward, but I'm not aware right now in my head of the grant funding cycle. But they did put a lot of money during COVID from the federal government into mass cultural facilities, because they were trying to get people to get back out in the communities and actually go back. And I know, people who understand that, some of our bigger complexes in the area that are hosting plays and concerts and everything, they were trying to, find out
Promote them
ways,
back, yeah.
to re-energize people back into the seats, so to speak. So I would try that, so we just haven't done it yet, but, so even if we did that and it was a total grant of, $196,000, we might get part of that, or we might get all of it. But at the same time, we know certain pieces of this have to be done. Otherwise, we're gonna have a ramp with no railings, and
Nowhere to go, right?
then we're gonna
Back
have
to
a ramp
nowhere.
that goes to the grass, and we'll get,
Ramp to
so we
nowhere.
gotta fix, so it is urgent. I put it as urgent and part of our enhancement, so that would be great. All right, the next item I have for you is a new proposal for this year. And again, this is coming out of a hugely successful effort by the DPW and following up on an effort that I did the previous year with the previous DPW director. Unfortunately, when I was applying for a shared streets and shared planning streets grant the previous year, we didn't have a fatality in town. And at that time, but we recognized, and I had received a number of near-miss complaints from people trying to cross our huge main street. We have increased traffic that absolutely is happening on our main street as Route 20 and the Mass Pike gets backed up constantly. So people are bypassing the normal 395 because they can't get there because it's so backed up, and they're coming down on Route 12 all the way through, Auburn all the way down. And so they're treating it like it's 395, and they're using the emergency breakdown lanes to cut over and to bypass cars that are either stopping and turning to a left or a right. And so we have had a number of near misses, but we also had a terrible fatality, which made me pick up the phone just like that and talk with the Mass District Director for Transportation and explain to him how disappointed I was, because I really feel that had we been able to get money for this particular project earlier, we might have prevented someone from dying. I say that with all sincerity because now, as you know, with this $400,000 grant, we now have improved pedestrian safety so far, with as far as it's been constructed in a very short period of time. These crosswalks and rapid flashing beacons that, again, are on way. They're backed up. They're probably in some container ship somewhere. But, we wanted a place, one, to grab people's attention in motor vehicle traffic to show that somebody is going to cross. And once they start to cross, recognizing that it's such a big width, the recommendations for the public safety boards was to actually put a safety island. And so people just saw the islands, and there's the paving that was done around them, and there's the lining that has been done, but you'll see that there are still some components that are missing, like the major eye-catching, flashing beacon that's supposed to be right in the middle that catches your eye when you're coming down the street, and two on either side. So Jared and I talked about this. So here we've already been moving right along. The one thing that the grant did not cover for us at all, and we think we absolutely have an unequivocal need, and I think it's an urgent need, is lighting. So lighting for pushing the button and getting them across is there. But, you know, as you're going across, utility poles are so far away from, on the sides of the road, you can't get lighting to the center of the main street. So I had asked Jared to look into looking at solar bollards, which are, you know, I think if you look in here, to show you, give you some ideas, which would cast light. There's a lot of different types, but here's one example of a solar bollard. And, you know, what you hope, if it's solar, you don't have to obviously wire into the middle of the road, which is very costly. But you would have, you know, the ability to downcast as you are approaching the islands. And what we've talked about is maybe putting one on either end of those islands, so when somebody is approaching, if it happens to be dark out, they would be able to see the downward reflection. So I gave you some examples. Jared was very helpful in helping me pull some of those together. I have, you know, preference for a certain style. Some of those may not be come in the solar variety, but we're gonna look around. But at any rate, we did get some quotes, and the actual quote for these kind of solar bollards was about, on the high side, $22,680 for putting 2 at each one of the 7 crossings.
Excuse me.
Bless you. So as you would be coming, they would be, you know, put, you know, on either end of that, those islands. Having said that, we also are now having to reconsider, when people are crossing, do we have illumination for the whole walkway? And Jared had explained that, you know, the Mass DOT and other people will look to see, is it adequate? So even if you have the flashing beacons and you have the ones on the low, right in the middle, you know, is the pedestrian lit all the way across? And so one of the things that has been also, I think, within the master plan to talk about beautifying the downtown with a village character and things like that is the notion of ornamental lighting. And obviously we don't want to rip up the road and put in wiring for ornamental lighting, but I put in your packets that technology has come a long way, and there are some very beautiful actual examples of ornamental lighting. And what I put together in this proposal for you, in addition to the bollards of 22,000, was to look at how could we make both the bollards and the ornamental lighting work with one another in terms of the style and the historic feel, with decorative bases, as well as the you know, green community theme of not making them hardwired where we can. So if we were to do this and put these style poles, we have these rapid, what do you call them, rapid
Rectangular rapid flashing beacons.
rectangular rapid beacons, yes.
Yeah, RRFBs.
Right, RRFBs. So those are on either side of where these crosswalks are, and then we have, you saw the actual concrete pylon in the middle, there would be a third one there. And so rather than just having a pole, which I think you see out there now, we can actually take those poles, there are decorative sleeves and things like that to actually make that, instead of just being a pole with these rectangular flashing beacons which signify someone's going across the road, we can actually outfit them to actually be a beautiful ornamental light. And if the ornamental light is there, you see that casts on the sides as the pedestrian's crossing, and it casts right down in the middle. It really, I think, would be wonderful. We talked about trying to do that. We would need at least 21 of these, you know, at each of the crosswalks. Right now, all we have is telephone poles with our LEDs that are way out. I think it would add to this project. I think it would, you know, get people to think about how we can make this downtown even more walkable and make it more inviting and make it more safe, because there are real dark spots all along the main road. So having said that, Jared had gotten some really good examples of these solar pedestrian light, solar ornamental lights, and I, you know, gave you some examples in here. Here you can see what it looks like without it being on, and then you can see what it looks like with it being on. Obviously, they have everything from attachments for putting, flower buckets up high, or, messaging. There's all kinds of things that we could do going forward, but those would be about 5,000. They're not cost prohibitive. They're about 5,000. The technology has come, quite a long way, and we need about 21 of them, because we need 3 at each place. So I put that in for a total cost of 105,000. And if we were gonna do that, this is, the only other thing that I've been really wanting to do is, as you go to Jocelyn Park, it is very dark. If you, even the other night with the lights on the trees, before that happened, all along Main Street, it's very dark because there is 1 or 2 poles, telephone poles, but there's not a lot of lighting. And if we could hardwire the same kind of beautiful ornamental lighting along the border of the park to Main Street, I think it would be great. And those, though, are a little bit more expensive because you have to do all the housing and all that kind of stuff. And we estimate that if we were to put them every 100 feet or every 75 feet near the benches, near the main part of the road, it would start to pull the whole corridor together. You would have the crosswalks with the ornamental lighting, then you would have, just the park, with that, and that, those 5 would, they're more expensive because they're hardwired, and there's a whole bunch of things that we'd have to do, but they'd be about $50,000 or $10,000 a piece for 5. So the total amount here for those kinds of improvements is $177,680. But again, it's to put all of this work right into the context of making it successful. And we, this project is mainly funded with $400,000 of grant money. So if we have to put in some money, I'm not saying that we won't look for more grant money. I will do that, but in the case we can't do that, or it comes later, even if we're already working on it, we can get reimbursed for that. And like Katie had announced to you, that's how we are driving up our free cash numbers. We're so successful in other ways. There will come a year or 2 where we might not be so successful in grant money, and inflation and all that kind of stuff takes a hold, and the government may not have so many opportunities for us. But while the iron is hot, we're gonna strike. So that's that particular initiative. I think, listening to people's concerns about the islands, I think they're valid. We're not done. I try to get people to understand we're not done. We're not the only, construction project. It actually has happened in lightning speed for state contracting and reimbursement. So I give my hat to Jared for working very hard to keep some of these projects moving. But so that's one I think that would be important this year in one way or another, and in some capacity, even if it's a component of it, I think will be important. Okay.
I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
Well, I agree with you about the lighting
Yep.
on the Main Street side. Are we doing anything about lighting on the back side where the handicapped spaces are and things like that? I mean, if someone's handicapped,
No,
I
it's,
think that's where they're going to need something like that.
I think you're right. I think the whole common has that issue. And so it's like the walk, it's like crawl, walk, run. I'm trying to get people to understand that we're making these changes. We've gone from, orange picnic tables on the common to what we have today. And I think that that's an excellent idea. It's one of the things that I don't think when we were putting together this, at this time, we had thought about, but obviously if we were to put in for a cultural facilities grant, that would be one of the things I would try to put money towards. And maybe we can add that and do the cost out. I mean, if we'd have to see if we could hardwire over there. I think we could because there is.
Sure you could, yeah, you're talking, that's what the cost, as the town manager had mentioned, is a little more for hardwiring, because you're talking conduits, pull boxes, any fees with National Grid for a new service drop, so, but we're trenching there in softscape, right through grass, which is always easier than going through pavement, so, we've got that going for us.
Okay,
So-
to go back to the garage, another light just went on. There are lights in the garage, right?
Yeah.
Well, just an idea.
Yep.
Is there anything there that you can leverage because there's already electricity there,
Oh, yes, I see what
to
you're saying.
work on.
Sure.
I mean, those,
Right, if you're already doing that one project and opening
Right.
things up there and there's
Right.
power
right,
there.
and I just think that it's important, I mean, if you're only gonna have one or two or even three handicap spots, I think
Well
it's
designed.
important to make sure they are well lighted.
Mhm.
I mean, it just makes sense, if we're doing all of this to be ADA compliant,
Yeah.
and we're in the dark.
So I would consider that if we were doing that, we should modify, the project, and I can do that, in the final submission with, Katie. Modify for, 2 or 3 lights in that area, no different than what we're doing.
Those
in the
3 or
front.
4 houses are probably used to the dark.
Well,
Yes.
that's what I was
Well,
So
wondering too.
I
You know,
is,
that's
it is a
just
balancing
it.
act.
It's a-
I
Yeah.
would say that we would look for, a lot of people were concerned about this board out here, and if you look at it, it is not glaring
No,
like a
that's
lot
a
of,
no, actually.
we were able to actually get a higher quality resolution because of the grant. And I wanted to leverage that capacity that we all of a sudden had to get something that wasn't gonna be, bothersome to the eyes, or would be, something that would, distract drivers, because we don't want that. And we want people to look quickly, understand it, and keep moving on, rather than straining to understand what's the message on the board.
Is that some kind of information that you can also share with the library too? Because if the
Yes.
library ends up getting, well, I only speak,
Yes. Well, they originally, I think they had their idea for a really big one, and I tried to explain that, that is
yeah, I
important.
mean, I've seen the finished one, but I think it's gonna be one of those screaming, blaring ones. And
Yeah.
if we can,
Yeah.
how much that costs, if we can somehow
Sure.
have them kind of match.
Yeah, I think that would be good. And maybe like the design in keeping with the library. I am having discussions with Brittany, and she's open to that. She was just wanting me to know because she had heard ours was coming. And I think now people see that and they may have different ideas. It's very different than the schools. And the schools matches, going into the main drive for, the middle school and the high school. As a monument sign, and this one out here is not a monument sign, it's truly a communication.
Where's the historical commission on all this? Where's Jean and her?
I went with her, and vetted the design with her.
Okay.
If you notice that
Beautiful.
sign out there, as Huguenot fleur-de-lis, it has the similar steepness, pitch to this town hall. If you look at the grade of our roofs,
Yeah.
it also tried to mimic, even though the shingles up there are not slate, but they mimic the grayness of a slate, the color on the roof to make that sign, which is hand carved in gold leaf, pop, was this gray kind of tone that matches. And then the wrought iron work on the top was put in place because when you walk up the front steps, for the war memorial right there, you've got the wrought iron as well. So I think, we incorporated as much as we could without being, in the dark ages. The whole point was to bring us up, but to do something stylish.
They're worried about our, redoing Main Street, where we're putting money in a plan, and they're already worried about what color the sidewalk. And I'm trying to explain to her with our master plan implementation committee that the state's gonna tell us, we're not gonna get to the road. They wanna know about the sidewalks first, they wanna make sure they're ADA compliant, they wanna know about stormwater management, and maybe when they're finished with their checklist, we'll talk about what color the sidewalks are gonna be and stuff, which is where they already are.
Yeah.
And we're way back here.
Sure. I mean, there's so many steps to
Yeah,
a major
yeah,
multi-million
yeah.
dollar project, and people have to understand that, we have really great professionals.
Right.
And we have teams of consultant professionals who are there to try to, bring in, and tailor-make a project as close to aesthetics that are pleasing to the community. But they also have things that have to be required.
As we do
in
these
the project.
walkways internally in
sure.
the common, we may wanna light those too with some polar type.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, we'll balance it. I think what we wanna do is see where could we do it,
Right, right,
and do we like it,
How
and
the
sometimes
how it
try
lays
it.
out.
Yep, and try it, and that's, like I said, it's that crawl, walk, run
Run,
type
right,
thing. And
yeah.
I think we've been very successful with our overall capital plan for being able to speak to the issues, go to town meeting, get the approval, and then, get the professionals to work on it, because a lot of these projects take a lot of effort, even away from your daily routines. And so capital is different than all the operational things and tasks that we do every day, but it becomes part of, you know, a really important part of what's important to
So the
us.
proposal is the islands would have 2 lights plus the beacon, is that the?
They'd have these bollard lights that are on
That's
either end that
each
are
end,
low,
yeah.
they're like
Ball-
maybe
and then a
not
light.
even 3 feet, you
Right.
know, and then they
Right.
cast down so that when approaching vehicle would see that cast down that way. And then if they have the ornamental lights, they would be on either
Yeah.
side of the walkway where it comes, because when
Okay.
you're pushing a button, that those rapid flashing beacons go off, and so people coming one way and the other way actually see it. And when you get closer to it, there's also one in the middle, so it's a trio across.
So I would also say that the people complaining about them are the ones that drive on Main Street and don't cross Main Street.
Right.
Because I've already
Right.
used them and I think they're awesome, because I just scurry to the middle.
Yes,
It's true.
it's huge. Even if you're in really good shape, it's
Yeah,
huge.
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, you know,
Yeah.
Chris Bird on the planning, you know, board had come to me, and you know, she got clipped. You know, and she walks avidly, and I just, you know, we have
Yeah.
people who are frequent walkers to Market Basket, you know, out of our senior housing, and
Mhm.
you know, they've got to cross the road. You
Yeah,
know,
no, it's
and
dangerous.
it
Yeah.
is,
Good
and it's
that-
scary. So
yeah.
I think, you know, those. Once it's all done, I think people will be, you know, pleased with it, and you know, that's our aim, is to help bring, you know, people's perspective to how important it is. to save
Accessibility,
lives.
that's what it
Yes.
comes down to, without taking your life in your hands.
Yeah, yeah. So
You know, before I forget,
yeah, sure.
on the back side, is that Water Street, or North Water Street, is that the name
On
of
the
it?
back of the common?
Yeah.
East Main Street.
East Main Street.
Definitely.
I just had this idea, just break it down. I
Yeah.
mean, no, instead of having lights, I mean, the people, like you said,
Yeah.
that live
Right.
there,
Uh,
instead of having lights that are always on, can you have the ones that go, are
The
motion
switch,
sensitive?
Yeah.
You know,
Maybe.
I mean, it's just something to throw out
Well, they can be
there.
timed as well.
Timed,
Yeah,
You know,
I mean,
so
but,
If you look at the pictures though, too, from those examples,
Yeah.
like in Topsfield, I mean, those lights are right on top of those houses too.
Yeah.
yeah,
And
it's just a thought, and then
just the
there
way
was
that the
someone
light is cast,
in
but
town, you know, someone that I know that came through town. And it was kind of early in the, just after you, what do you call it, lined off the area, the yellow lines around the,
medians.
yes, the medians. And what she said was, she says, you know, you don't really realize they're there, even though they're
Right.
yellow. She says, maybe it would be good if there were reflectors in there.
yes, we talked about that.
So
And
it's
again,
just
that's
something to
that is a
throw-
contractor that we're waiting on, and it's one of the things that we will do, so you can see it as you approach.
And I thought, oh, okay, I'll mention it somewhere.
And-
I've mentioned it.
And with concerns
due
related to
diligence.
being close proximity to residential houses, I think he was referring to this picture here. Oftentimes you can actually set the lumens of the solar, you know,
Yeah,
so
okay.
that it's not, and as you can see, a lot of times people want them on the sidewalks right next to very close, closely built houses that go back, you know, historically. So I think we could, you know.
They're a lot more sophisticated now anyway, as far as
Right.
light pollution and everything. You
Yeah.
can-
Right.
So to answer all the Facebookers that are gonna say that there's gonna be a 5-foot wide drift of snow going down the middle of the road,
How do I answer that?
how do we answer that?
Oh, okay, I don't think you have to answer that. I think we have very capable DPW drivers,
Yeah.
so much so that we had 2 drivers that had won the regional snowplow rodeo competition.
There we go, all right.
competition.
We just
And
happen
they,
to have,
and they,
so it's not-
and they were sent to Colorado, all
Colorado,
expenses,
national.
all expenses
Hey,
paid, to
one's a
compete
woman.
in the national snowplow rodeo.
We have the.
And we had sent our only woman in DPW
That's right.
along with one of our other gentlemen, and they won second place.
And
So I
There we
really
go.
find it ironic that now we have people worried about the skill of our DPW. So I answer it like this, you know, change is not easy, but people
Have to give it a
become,
chance.
you know, accommodating to change over time. And that's what a community.
I think they envision the DPW having to get out there with shovels in the middle of the
Well,
road.
we
and
we have stuff that, so we may have that happen on a really bad snow blizzard. We have DPW goes out and does that now.
You mean we're not
They
having
do the
one tonight?
sidewalks.
No, I
Didn't you
think we
listen
only
to the news?
I thought it was only 2 inches. Is
Didn't
it
you
really
listen
more?
to the news? The way they're talking, it's like we're gonna have
Oh,
a
right.
flood.
Yeah,
God.
so I'm
They're telling people how to drive.
so confident in the capacity of our employees. I really am.
I always knew when I was coming to the town of Oxford, going down the pike, coming back from the Providence Airport, no one had to welcome me to Oxford because I did the road changed immediately.
Yes.
I could drive it. I
Right,
could
and
go
we get
through
a
sun, I
lot
was
of
kidding.
real accolades for that. And,
Yes.
you know, I mean,
Snowy
whether
nights.
it's ice or whether it's snow,
You
or
notice.
black ice, we have people who are constantly monitoring that and getting out, and it's our job to make the roads as safe as possible. So, but that's how I would answer it. We have such great people and competent people that they've won,
Snowboard
you know,
rodeo.
second place nationally for snow plowing. So, and the last item I had for you for this year is the Green Communities Energy Reduction Projects. I have kept it exactly the same as when I filed it the very first year. This is going to be our third year for this grant program. It's over $1 million over a 5-year period. What I have learned is, even though in here I have the description of the projects I picked, with a total projected cost of about $247,598. As you are probably aware, this gets offset by rebates from National Grid as well as the Green Communities Grant Program. What I have learned over the past 2 grant cycles is they have, even though I put this way and filed a specific plan for each year this way, the Green Communities has their own ideas about what projects they really would like you to focus on. So hence last year, for the first year we got $166,000. Last year we got $200,000 in a competitive round. And during that time period, when we were applying, they really wanted us to do weatherization at the 2 elementary schools, as well as doing half the LED replacement. So my gut instinct tells me they may come back again and say, well, why don't you do the other half of the LED? But even if we were to do the DPW projects that we had on tap, the LED lighting at the animal shelter, bandstand, cemetery LED lighting, changing it out, community center, the library boiler replacement, we added that in, and town hall LED interior lights. That total, like I said, would be about $247,000, but the overall offset, where the state would come in, is about $225,000. So we wind up having to do potentially $59,000 as a match. And that will give us an annual cost savings of about $24,246
A little over 2-year payback.
a year. So the biggest bang for our buck, of course, would be the high school, you know, but those projects are $500,000 projects, right? So even if you get $200,000, you have to say, okay, are we ready to move in that direction? So, and is it the project they want us to do? So those things are on our radar to really, but in the meantime, we are driving down our overall energy costs, and Katie and Trish keep track of that.
Well, you did Chafee and Barton already, or you're in the process of doing Chafee
Yes,
and Barton.
yes, yep. So that's that, and I'm so glad that was a project, grant program I took on when I first came in the door, and it's become a really good, solid
What's the
program.
total on that? It's over
Over $1 million, for
$1 million
overall.
something, isn't it?
Yes,
I mean,
yes,
over a
over-
5-year
over a
period.
5-year period.
5-year period, so you
Right.
just take it in tranches.
There used to be, when there were fewer people, fewer communities participating, there used to be upwards of $400,000 a year. And you know, this town actually took its own initiative to not lose out on rebates from the National Grid for changing out our streetlights, because that's another place that ate up a huge amount of money in a budget. And you know, prior to this getting passed, you know, our former DPW director and I sat down and we said, let's go forward, get this done. And we, you know, spoke with Katie about how to actually move the project forward, and then got significant rebates, upwards of $68,000 for that project, and another $68,000 for one-time energy credits, so to speak. So it wound up actually being a really good thing to do, but other communities were using that 400,000 when they first got it towards like changing out the streetlights. But we've already done that, so now we're into the energy footprint for our buildings, and so we keep doing that.
So the library boiler replacement, would there be limitations to that?
Yeah,
as far as
the problem, the energy return of savings is not great on boilers, right?
Yeah.
So the state likes to look at where do you maximize that? Where's the return quickest on investment? I don't have the entire grid in front of me, but they do. And when I was like, well, listen, we really want to do this and we'll help fund the project, they're like, yeah, we don't want to do boilers. Because the boiler return on investment is minimal. Even though it helps you over the long term, the investment that they make, it takes them longer to come out for a payout with the 85,000 because the savings is not.
Well, the library had a request this year for controls, 30,000.
Yes.
And then next year, they're talking about 100,000 to replace the chiller. And we were talking about at great length why we're doing it in pieces. Now, they didn't have a request for a boiler.
Yeah. So
But-
it could be because it's just not on their radar. You know, it's like one of those things that we had a whole
Jared.
assessment that was redone, and
You didn't have it on your in Bedlam improvements.
No, and I'm guessing because we had it sort of
Yeah,
programmed.
it was already in this,
communities.
and it's
But if you
not-
don't get the boiler, if you're saying
Yeah.
that there's a chiller for 2024,
Right.
and there's controls for 30,000 in 2023,
Yeah.
and we were questioning when they were presenting it, why didn't we put both?
Go
And we
together. Well,
talked
I
to
don't
Mike
know.
about
Yeah,
that.
Could
it's,
be-
it's sort of, and I think how Mike and I approached it was that it's sort of two different, it can be two
different components.
components, right?
Right.
And two different, not trades, obviously, but they can happen independently, right? And we're trying to break up
Yeah.
over the course of a 5-6 year capital, 6-year capital plan, right? What that impact is in a given year, so we can do other projects. We have other priorities in a given year, right? So we're trying to spread that ask out over those years. So if we can split it, the controls, I think the controls are far older than the chiller, if I'm recalling
Yeah, we
correctly.
said, yeah, that's what you were saying.
So, I think their original. it was
I'm just
original
wondering
to
if
the-
they don't
So,
like the boiler, there's.
Yeah.
So Katie and I have another theory with some of this HVAC stuff. Had I known that the state was going to go crazy with $4 billion, a lot of it actually funding municipal and school HVAC
You're right.
projects.
For air, right.
We got 50,000 for our roof replacement on North Station, and I'm very pleased with that, with the efforts of Representative Joe McKenna. But I had no idea, because I was curious. I said, what are they looking, to do? But there were substantial funding out of that $4 billion for municipal HVACs. I would have done it for this town hall because we have, air conditioners, hanging out of windows. But I think we will have an opportunity, potentially through ARPA funds, to look at air quality. And we might be able to incorporate some of that, which would be great, because then we can actually turn that money back to another project. And that's the
Right.
whole thing. We have built such great capacity every year now to be able to, still do this huge backlog of maintenance infrastructure. And as we're moving through it, we keep checking off. I mean, I have all these projects on my whiteboard in my office that I keep checking off. And a lot of it is because we're building capacity by, finding the funding, making sure we stick to the plan. And even if we do stick to the plan and find an alternative funding source, all the better, right? Because
Well,
then we can move on to another project.
You mentioned the North Station and the 50,000 for the roof. In 2024, we have a request from to redo the North Station for $1.5 million. And I'm saying, are we putting a Band-Aid on a roof that we're gonna maybe tear down and redo, if that was to be, I know there's, we've staffed it now, which is great, and we've got response times for the rest of the town. Are we there yet? My wife would say, yes, we are, honey, we're still in Oxford. But it's a big town.
Yeah, I think that sometimes, you look at the cost of something like that, and then you look at the bigger thing. I don't know if it's really replacing the entire building down there, or if we're talking about additions in the future. There may be components that stay, and there may be components towards the
Just
back of
something
the
we're
building.
coordinating so that we
Yes,
don't
yes.
throw good money after
Good.
bad.
Yes, I would imagine that I would, that my little radar would go up for that as well, by looking, outwards. We like to try to keep whatever buildings we can, You know, and even if it means we have to put in an effort to hold the building together, before we can make a decision. You know, there are some buildings that are way beyond that. You know, the Jocelyn Annex is one of those. And then we found out the hard way that, you know, it had asbestos in it, and we had already appropriated enough money to demolish it, and then we couldn't demolish it because of that, you know.
Now we got a Barton Street. So it's just,
Yeah, that's a whole nother one. But
Yeah.
like I said, crawl, walk, run,
Yeah,
Mr. Chairman.
that's what I said, that's mine, that's my,
I would
that's, crawl, walk,
like-
run is what
Yeah,
I
I
say.
know. But that's all I have for you tonight.
So,
You know,
looking at this,
sure.
just to give you a recap here.
Yeah, please.
Okay. Between DPW and, what they've got out of free cash, they're looking for about 759,000. School's looking for 468 for siding, which I'm kinda anxious about. So that comes to $1,227,000 out of free cash. Now, I didn't include the Mackenzie Street Dam because we got some grant money coming.
Hopefully, we
Hopefully.
need to apply. We're working
And I didn't include the levy for the 500,000. I'm only talking about free cash that we've,
Yeah.
police department wanted nothing. So what you presented here today with your request, we're at $1,611,000 in free cash. And I know we started free cash at before town meeting at $3,400,000. We appropriated town meeting 667, left us $2,733,000. I know we're gonna earmark stabilization for 250, absentee fund for 50, OPEB fund for 65. That brings us down to 2,368,000. And last year, we had free cash of $1,700,000, levy at 500, grant for 219, bond for the fire truck of 685. We funded capital request of 3.1 million. This year, it looks like we're gonna have, police didn't want anything. It looks like we're gonna have, out of free cash, we're gonna have money left over for some other things. I don't know, I don't wanna put you on the spot, but
No, we also.
we can always find,
Well, one of the things that we're actually going
That
through
doesn't
right
agree with my
now.
calculations.
Yeah, I mean,
Well,
I just went through a presentation about the whole ARPA funding and what the narrow categories are, and we're gonna be very careful about, you know, which way we go with some of that, and part of it is gonna go towards things that we know we can justify, and things that we know when the federal government says, you need to provide us this information, and if it is within keeping of the guidelines, then fine, we'll, have been used the money correctly. But the town, unlike the CARES money, for ARPA money, the town is on the hook for that money. So the CARES funding was coming through the state.
Right.
So the state, even for the electronic messaging board, had said, okay, you can put this in, I explained what it was, all that kind of stuff, provided the data, but left out the other portions of it with design and things like that, because it met the need of public health communication. Same thing with ARPA, we're gonna have to be very careful, because the difference here is the state is not the one who's on the hook with the Treasury. We are. So I did a presentation before the board to talk about the major categories that we think we can justify well. Some of it's loss of revenue, some of it's remunerating essential employees through the whole COVID pandemic, and some of it is looking at administration of the grant monies that are sitting there, and sewer infrastructure, our feasibility study, where do we take that, the next thing, maybe HVAC, things that we know we can justify. So, because if we don't use it, we'll be,
I know the
And
state's
it's-
sitting on
it's-
another $2 billion.
yeah.
They released 3.2 and they're sitting on another 2.
So-
Yet to be determined
Right.
what they're gonna do
So
with
the
it.
next round, when they start looking at, doing their creative legislative
Yeah.
earmarking, I'll be there again, trying to find out, okay, what can we get there? Because when it comes through that vehicle, once it comes to the state, through the state to the town, that's for whatever the project is, there's
I
no
know they're
backwards
talking
reaching
about
for the,
Chapter 90 increase in
Federal.
check with some of that,
yes,
$2 billion.
that would be what we would be very happy with.
Sure, it won't be a huge increase, but it'll be an increase.
So we'll see how it all goes, but I
So,
appreciate, the
I just would recap,
summary.
I'm sure Katie's numbers may be a little different than mine, but I'm looking at, coming up, we got the Mackenzie Street Dam, like I said, was 800,000, but we're gonna get a grant for 700 or
Well, we're
change,
working
we're
on it.
hoping on it.
It'd be
We're-
75%, so we
So-
would have to.
That's something I've been working on since 2018 when I got here.
Rural Field
Well,
lighting, the
yeah.
request was for 100,000. I think that's a good thing for the trust fund.
Yeah.
Entertain that.
Maybe.
The cameras was what the school wanted, but I'm really worried about the request for their $468,000 for Barton and Chafee, because I think we're gonna find a similar situation like the library. They're gonna start taking that siding off.
Well, maybe we talk a little bit and do some exploration about
I think-
whether it is impacting air quality, whether there is
Oh,
any,
it is.
you know, so we might be able to tap into some.
And
But see, that's that whole management side that we have to explore. We never know quite, you know,
I think that's a can of
what's gonna
worms.
kinda come through, and
That number could triple.
it could.
The can of worms with the library, though, it was real structural
Yes,
issues
it was.
Yeah.
It
that
was
we
frightening.
found that
Right.
were, whereas given the age of that building compared to the schools, where they're not as old, obviously, a different system, right? Different building.
There's
at the moment,
moisture
too.
intrusion in both those
Yeah,
buildings, and you
but-
can see it on the interior. So
Yeah.
I'm just saying, well, if you see it on the interior and decide there's something in the middle, you know, what, is that solid material or is that rotted like the library? That's my concern. I
Yeah.
know they're doing test boreholes now for the foundation.
We did. Yeah,
When
so-
I bet you you're finding that the foundation goes all the way down, cracking.
No, we're very pleased with what we
Really?
found. Yeah, that everything is essentially above grade. One location where it looks like they backfilled a little bit, there was some cracking 6 inches down.
Good.
But yeah, for the
Yeah.
most part, all is what you see is what you get there.
Yeah,
So
so that's great.
Well, that's good news.
yeah, yeah.
You never know, right?
Well, no, that's the thing. I'm just
We
saying.
don't know, I mean, like I said, we've had a lot of things that just pop up, and that's why the more we invest in maintenance, and remember, you know, I think one of the best budgetary positions that I ever made the pitch for was to create the position of facilities director, and to really expand our technicians, so that we can take care of problems in these buildings and have a maintenance schedule in a much more timely way, because the costs related to the insurance claims for things was just unbelievable. And, you know, things like coming in, you know, as a brand new manager, and on my first Thanksgiving, you know, the entire corridor of the school administration was underwater. And
Yeah.
it was sub-zero out, you know?
Speaking
It
of
was-
school, we're still waiting to hear from the mass building,
Sure,
school
that's
building
what
on that.
yep.
We'd be on the hook for $4 million plus any remediation to redo the middle school, which we still have money for the roof that we bonded for $2 million. And of course, next year, they're looking for $1.7 million for the other 3 roofs. So those are big numbers.
Sure they are. And, but see, we're talking about handling a lot of smaller projects.
Right.
But those smaller projects can become very expensive if we don't take care of them.
Right.
So, but then there will be those trade-offs, like we have a public forum that's coming up about roadway borrowing. You know, there's only so much creativity and magic that management can do and administration can do to fix things like all of the roads that were put in place without the right,
Without a
you know,
road bed.
yeah, right, so and we can't do it fast enough, and we still taking, you know, there's, so, you know, that's why we can only do so far, and then we have to say, okay, we need to actually do something more radical.
Yeah.
And, but that's the life of a community. Sometimes you're doing small projects and you're following your capital plan and you're taking care of all those maintenance things that have been backlogged. And sometimes it's saying, okay, we really need to invest in a new building or new infrastructure that is sizable. So I think that sounds good to me. I appreciate the opportunity. I apologize for your handouts getting to you a little bit late, you know. I told Katie, I said I had my COVID booster yesterday, and I came into work today and I was freezing. I had a couple Tylenol and I was better after that. I've been
I
the
didn't
chills
do well.
and my
Mark
arm
didn't
is
do
sore.
well. I didn't do well.
Yeah, so
I did
I'm
bad.
I had
just,
no problem with the first.
I ended up going to the
I didn't have any
doctor.
problem with the booster
Yes.
either.
Yeah.
Back to
So-
the doctor.
But-
That's how bad it
Mine
was.
tomorrow.
Oh,
You
boy.
guys all get the
Moderna?
same manufacturer as you
I
had
don't know, I got
for
the
the series?
Moderna, and it was fine with
That
the
makes
first
mine.
2, and then I got the half boost, and I had to go to the
Well, I got my
doctor.
flu shot the same day, so.
Oh,
I didn't
don't know
do
if
that.
I
makes
won't
any
double up.
No, I didn't do that. They talked me out of doing that, but I was still, I had to go to the doctor. My arm was still 3 weeks.
Whoa.
Yeah.
And it's half the dose.
I do want to close, because I know you've met with all the different departments, and I want to thank the committee. I know you look at a lot of detail, and, you know, some of that detail changes, but we appreciate the confidence that you place in the management structure and our finance team to say, you know, we want to save money for the town. We want to leverage our resources, but we wanna take care of our infrastructure. It's very, very important.
It's a balancing act.
Yeah, it is. So I appreciate your listening ear, and, you know, when I put together my budget and the capital plan, it's gonna come back to you in the form of a hearing. And, we hope we have your support for that, but at any rate, you know, it will be as balanced as possible. I think the biggest take home here has been, since I've come here, we have really worked as partners with the school, in funding their capital needs as well as their operational needs, and we really have. And it's worked out very, very well. It's not to say they don't have some big ticket items, but we do too. And, you know, it's not
Well, Justin
one
has
versus
been
the
very
other,
good.
it's together working as partnering. Katie has committed to do that, I have. I know that our facilities has, and our DPW director has, and our new superintendent is trying to
And
follow
Mike
the
has
same.
been very,
Yeah.
very open, and Justin's been very communicative.
Yes, he has. Yep,
And
he's
they've done a great
fantastic.
job. And they've addressed a lot of the stuff, the small stuff, they're taking care of out of the revolving fund, because they've got money as
Yes.
well. as
Yeah,
we-
they have a different ability to do certain things
So,
than the municipal
and
side.
so they kept
Get
it
to
to, basically to the one ticket item, which is the siding, basically,
Sure.
this year. So
Yeah,
they were
that'll be
very
good.
focused. And we've got a good dialogue. I mean, I spent a good day with them and going through the buildings and seeing,
Yep.
visually seeing what the issues are.
Well, I just want you to know, if you ever have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me, contact Katie. You know, if we can find an answer for you, that's what our job is,
Yeah.
you know.
Communication.
And if, yeah, you know, that way you can also speak, about the importance of these things.
Yeah, in the
because-
community, right. You're well informed, you
Yeah.
can inform others, right?
And welcome aboard. Thank you so much.
All right,
Okay,
thank you. I don't know if there's any new business. I don't think so. We're not gonna be meeting as a finance committee for budgeting until sometime in what, February?
Yep, February.
February?
Yeah, late February.
Late February.
Yeah.
Old business, none that I can think of. So, everybody, happy and safe holidays and happy
Yes.
New Year's.
Same to you.
And we'll see you in the new year. And I hear a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.